It's 12 years of my work, and just 2 weeks ago we published the report, which is available, and we printed out, and we have printed out both in Polish and English version of this report for you to check. The electronic version, of course, you can download yourself. Now we know what has happened, but hearing the story from Korean downing and MH17 is like repeating history again and again. 3rd times we have terrorist attack of Russia on the airliners with innocent people in it. That's amazing that the civilized countries cannot do anything about it. I really hope it will be changed now. And I admire Dutch people to fight in the courts, and we will stand with you. Key technical findings of the report. While approaching the Smolensk aerodrome, the captain issued a command to go around, reduce flap angle, and initiated the departure procedure. At that time, an explosion occurred in the left wing, about 100 meters before the birch tree, which according to the Russian report destroyed this wing. I put a small model so you can understand. This is the model of Tupolev 154M, and this is the part of the wing that was separated due to explosion 100 meters before this tree. This is about 9% of the lift force. And there are many situations in the past where due to some engine explosion, for example, such portion of the wing was lost and airplane landed safely without any problem. In this case, of course, it was charge inside of the wing that exploded, so it was not very nice, smooth cut. But in addition to the removing this 6 meters of the wingtip, the slots, which is in the beginning of the wing and flaps, were also damaged. Therefore, at the moment of this explosion, the G-force was registered to drop from 1.1 due to the fact that the airplane was departing to 0.6, which means it lost the lift force. The autopilot immediately reacted to this by pushing the airplane to the gliding position and pushing the left wing forward, shadowing the good right wing, and therefore balancing the lift force on both sides and securely fly together, then taken by regular rear pilots. However, due to the progressive damage of the left wing, the airplane starts to turn down with the left wing down. We are talking about 40 meters almost span of the wings. So the story given by Russian that the airplane was cut by the birch tree at the 6 meters above the ground cannot hold any water, because if you start to rotate 6 meters above the ground, you have to touch with 20 meters still hanging wing. But it is not anything wrong for Mr. Putin. So after that, 4 seconds later, the next part of the airplane was separated from the airplane. This was the T-section of the vertical stabilizer with horizontal stabilizer. That part, which was soon after STAFS 38, and caused basically the airplane not to be controlled anymore, and in the position of minus 90 degrees, it dropped like free flight. This part, on the other hand, flew separately. It is also like a small airplane. So from the moment of separation of this part, there were 2 objects flying, and they were noticed by witnesses. This one flew more to the south, the whole airplane more to the north. Eventually, when this part touched the ground at the minus 90 or plus minus 10 degrees, full explosion happened in the fuselage. This explosion separated the tail section with 3 jet engines, which is the heaviest part of the airplane. And typically, when you fly a very shallow angle at 76 meters per second horizontal velocity, only 12 to 18 meters per second vertical, this part, the engines, would move forward the most because there's a lot of kinetic energy, a lot of mass with the same velocity. The light things will stop first, the heavy things will move forward. This explosion pushed back the whole tail section with the pressure bulkhead, and therefore reduced the kinetic energy, and therefore it stopped at the beginning of the field of debris. Other thing at this moment happened was the left door was shut into the ground. From that position, shut into the ground, 1 meter deep. They couldn't find that door for several days, and that was fortunate for us because they didn't manipulate this critical evidence. Yeah. Other things, of course, would be the whole destruction, the whole penetration, and the fragmentation of the whole airplane. Forensic labs detected hexagon, which is RDX, pentrite, TNT, and post-explosion compounds on the airplane structure fragments. The explosions caused the death of everybody on board and the total destruction of the aircraft. I would like to show some pictures, examples of the evidence. Due to the explosion, the material not only can store the traces of the chemicals that are producing the explosion, but also they deform in particular way. We can see on the top left picture so-called post-explosion curls on that wing that was separated at the very beginning. We have made also simulations of this particular theories from Russia, and we found that if really the airplane would hit the birch tree of the 44 centimeters diameter, basically the wing will cut the tree cleanly with some damage to the slots and leading edge. But any part of the wing will not be separated. The impact of this vertical stabilizer was very interesting, and this is quite new to many of people right now. In fact, in the MAC report, people took the proper evidence, taking pictures, and they found that on the grass, on the south groove, there is a paint, and that paint is from that end of the horizontal stabilizer. This was the only paint on that part left over after the separation. And this basically hit the ground, like you can see on this picture, and then disintegrated and moved forward. So we know that the salt groove was done by separate parts, nothing to do with the airplane as a full body itself. We found the traces of fragments left on the ground. You can see the path of flying of this part. It was quite random. It was rotating and flying like an aerodynamic small airplane, but still falling down, and left dropping the fragments of that part on the floor, on the grass. Parallel to that, the second path was done from the debris from the left wing, which was also damaged, and therefore, due to aerodynamic forces, dropped from time to time a piece of segments of this left wing in a parallel fashion and eventually hit the north groove. The first point of the north groove is the piece of the exposed metal sheeting cutting into the soil, as you can see, and of course sheared out very quickly. Based on that, we can identify the orientation of the airplane, which basically hit this way with the 90% minus 90 degrees orientation in terms of rotation about each axis and nose down. If there would be no explosion, this would be kind of that type of downing or destroying through the crashing. But it was before it happened, soon after the airplane touched with the left wing the ground, explosion happened. This is the epicenter of this explosion looking from the satellite picture. Within 1.5 kilometer, there was several dozen of witnesses who heard the sound like thunder. They couldn't see the airplane at that time, but they could hear the explosion. We know that from that location, if it was exploded, the parts from the particular location of the fuselage, which you can see on the left front part of the ballast tank, the parts was pushed forward and dispersed all over, as you can see in this picture from the satellite. Of course, at the same time, the roof of the airplane and the whole body of the fuselage was fragmented. We were able to put together basically 90% of each side of the airplane and 66% of reconstruction of the roof of this airplane. We found a number of curls and petals, post-explosive signature deformation of the sheet of the skin of the airplane, and 4 concentrations where the most of the shock wave was pushing out from this fuselage, which is near the cockpit, near the kitchen, near the center wing, and near the pressure bulkhead at the end. These are the examples of those curls from the roof of this airplane. They are twisted a number of times because the shock wave is breaking the material, and with high velocity is pushing out, so there's a big difference between the particular point of this metal and the rest of the metal, and therefore is that rolling distance, the rolling function of this shock wave. In fact, I can tell you that similar curls are in MH17. We found them just looking at your airplane due to the explosion outside of the nose of the airplane. So not necessarily they need to happen, this explosion need to happen inside, it could happen outside as well. The very interesting example of the internal high pressure we found in particular location, which is the passenger place of the fuselage. This part didn't fragment it to many pieces. In fact, it only broke the roof along the one stringer and opened the roof before falling in the inverted position down to earth. That, of course, shows that the explosion needs to be in the air, because if the fuselage would hit the ground first, you will see the situation in the top right picture. The roof would be indented inside of the passenger space and would not be able to spread nicely outside. But it was spread nicely outside, and you could see on this yellow area, which we highlighted for you to easier recognize the spread of this roof for the left side of the roof, then port side, which is left part of the fuselage, then fuselage bottom, then starboard, which is right side of the fuselage, and right side of the roof. If you examine the fracture edges of the roof, you can see there is no any material loss, and basically the material open along the rivets which were connected to the stringer. And this has happened typically due to hoop stress under the high pressure inside of the cylinder. So we could put it back, in fact, and fit together the whole fuselage, and there will be no damage. Okay, it happened so beautifully. Well, the officers of Russia, they immediately realized the same way as we do, that this is the very strong evidence and visible from satellites. You don't need to go there to see this big item. So on the April 11th, which is one day after, they removed everybody from the field 4 or 5 p.m. and started to cut this roof from that particular part of the fuselage. In fact, those pictures were taken by journalists, Russian journalists, who published them in the newspaper next day, saying, look, our heroes are working so hard to recover most likely victims which are over there. Well, it was not recovery, this was cover-up, his story. They cut a roof into many pieces and did not acknowledge this in the MAC report or any information that is officially published. Instead, we found a document produced by Russian prosecutor office that requested experts to examine this part of the fuselage. Well, the expert issued the statement in his document, as you can see, copy with stamps. The upper part of the fuselage has not survived the crash. Well, here it is. Now they have everything. They cut the roof, and then they have the official expert, and the official expert says there is no roof. So it means the roof was destroyed on the contact with the ground, which is completely lie. This is not the only lie from the Russian report. For example, this is a picture of the spar of the left wing, which is supposed to be cutting through the birch tree. So obviously, a birch tree is not invisible. If it goes through the spar, would have to break it, but the spar was not broken in the proper location. So what they did, they made a nice line and cut it according to this line, the red line, as you can see, to 2 pieces, so they can claim that the tree broke this spar during the approaching the ground. Well, we did a lot of effort to answer any question. We have built, together with National Institute of Aviation Research, 33 million elements finite element model with inverse engineering using the twin identical airplane that was used by the government of Poland. We also tested every piece of the material in this airplane, so we have very accurate ability to test any scenario. We could put down into the ground, we could fly into the birch tree or another tree, we could put explosion elements, we can see what happens to passengers, we can get any answer. By comparing the simulation using, according to Russian theory, which is falling to the ground with 76 meters per second horizontal velocity, 18 meters per second vertical velocity, as the whole airplane without on the left 6 meter left wing, we found that individually every piece of this debris looks different. For example, this is the tail section. On the left you can see finite element, on the right the real state. On the left there is no bulkhead with the tail section. On the right you see a bulkhead. On the left all engines were separated from the tail section. Even that central part one was tilted. On the right side only right engine was separated due to explosion, and the other two were together with the tail section. This is the famous door which was embedded into the ground at the beginning of the crash scene. It looks like embedded, like without much of the deformation, as you can see. Now, if we do the same observation for the simulation, the door cannot be embedded. if a horizontal velocity basically drags this door forward and twists and bends, there's no way to cleanly inject this door inside of the soil. We did this special work together with Mia, and we found that in order to get this door into the ground, the vertical velocity has to be 120 meters per second, which is about 10 times more than falling airplane vertical velocity. And horizontal velocity has to be less than 30 meters per second, which is less than half of the horizontal velocity of the airplane. Well, now we know that the position, if in this position you have explosion, the vector which is going into the ground and backwards will reduce the horizontal velocity and increase vertical velocity to the requirements of physics. Overall, we can calculate that there is not enough energy in the system of the airplane by its own to generate 60,000 fragments, as you can see on the satellite picture, that are all over this area. Basically, you need to have extra source of energy, and obviously this extra source of energy is explosions. The www.smolenskrashnews.com contains all in English materials that we collected, including the report in English and report in Polish, and some other presentations that you may want to explore further. Some scientific aspects that was done by me and my colleagues were published in peer-reviewed journals, international journals, and I can tell you 3 of my graduate students got PhD within these 12 years to work on that topic of Smolensk. All 3 are Chinese, and all 3 got very good salary and were invited back to China. And they are now prominent professors in China. I asked my colleagues in China why Chinese government has so much interest in this topic to hire 3 people from one school back to China. And they said, well, we have a neighbor that we need to understand, and this will help us to do it. Thank you.